Good morning, Chairman. We are now live.
Thank you, Thomas, and good morning to everybody. Good to see you again. Welcome to everybody in the public gallery and everybody at home. My name's Councillor David East. To my right is my Vice Chair, Robbie Woods, and I'm assisted today by Thomas from Democratic Services. Can I remind those in attendance that the audiovisual feed of this meeting will be broadcast live on the council website, so welcome to everybody at home. And we'll move to the formal agenda. Apologies for absence.
None received.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the audit meeting held on the 21st of July. Sorry, my mistake. Declaration of interest of members, and of course you can make those at any time during the meeting as well. Any declarations? Okay, very good. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. Items to approve the minutes of the last meeting as correct. Any points on that? Are we all agreed the minutes are good? Okay, that's carried forward then, thank you. We need to show our hands apparently. Those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. Items of business then. First item today is the update on the external audit and the annual finance statement for Lincolnshire County Council. This will be from Claire and KPMG, I guess, yeah?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Yes, this report presents an update on the progress made to date on the external audits of the annual financial statements for 24-25 for both Lincolnshire County Council and the Lincolnshire Pension Fund. Rashpal from KPMG has kindly attended this meeting today and is happy to briefly talk through this report and to answer any questions you may want to raise. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. At the previous two audit committees, so the meeting in June, we presented our audit plans on both the County Council and the Pension Fund. At the July audit committee, we produced our value for money risk assessment. Since some time has passed since then, and there's still quite a lot of time until the statutory deadline of the 27th of February to issue our audit opinion, I thought it'd be appropriate to bring a very brief report just to show progress, to give you assurance that the audit was progressing and moving along. As you'll see from our report, on page 15 of your pack, this report aims to do this. We've commented on each of the significant audit risks that we identified in our audit plan and other risks that we identified. Work is ongoing on all of these areas, but to date there's no significant issues or findings to report. And we're progressing work in respect to our value for money work. As we indicated at our last audit committee, we had some issues picked up regarding the procurement process that warranted further testing. We, rather than undertake additional work initially by ourselves, we looked at the work of it, considered the work of internal audit before moving on and deciding to scope our work appropriately. We're continuing to undertake some work just around some of the elements of the procurement process and walking through that just to make sure it's operating as planned and there's no significant weaknesses in there. If there's significant weaknesses in there, we will report those to you yourselves. But the audit is progressing as planned. Like I said, the statutory deadline is 27th of February. Our plan was always to try and sign off ahead of Christmas, and that's currently on schedule. Happy to take any questions from yourselves.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I think the only thing that really stood out to me as a concern was the manual overrides. That seems to be an ongoing issue because it's not the first time I think in an external audit it's been picked up on. You mentioned that that's still going on. My questions are you comfortable that as a process double entry manual overrides are still occurring? Or would you rather that didn't happen in the first place? Because it would appear that we're introducing a compensating procedure to kind of back check them. I just wondered if you could explain that a bit more for us.
Yeah, so basically, for other members, it's page 19 of the pack in terms of management override of control. So it's purely in relation to journals. So journals can be input onto the system, and there's no segregation of controls over those. So, as this is regarding journals, and journals is one of the common ways that you can use to change the financial statements, it's something we always consider as standard risk. And ultimately, we have to undertake alternative procedures to address those risks. So we'll look at a range of high-risk criteria when looking at journals to make sure we'll look at, we'll download all the journals and make sure all the transactions are in the direction you would follow and there's no unusual debit and credit combinations. Those are typical what we would do over management override of control. Now, it's not uncommon that in large public sector organisations and actually large organisations themselves that this control doesn't operate. The county council will have tens of thousands of journals. I looked to offices, but in that sort of range. So that's a lot of journals that would have to then have a second review. So we tend to get comfortable with the arrangements the council has in place and do enhanced procedures to make sure we're satisfied from our risk perspective.
Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Just to give the councillors confidence that as an accountant, I've worked in the public sector and private sector, I've never yet seen an audit letter planning document that doesn't include management override as a risk. It is absolutely bog standard. I've yet to see it without journals in there. It's completely common practice. So for me, actually what I've seen over the last few years is the management override risk materialising has been almost non-existent, because journals are always going to have you'll have things where you detect them and have double sign-off before they put through, but in reality is the testing is fine, but this is completely normal and nothing to be concerned about.
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Over the years, we've had major uncertainties in respect of valuing property, pension fund liabilities, etc. You're not flagging anything of that significance. Are you assured on those fronts?
Yeah, so as you can see on pages 17 and 18, they're two of the key significant risks that we've got. We're undertaking our standard programme of work. Last year's findings didn't identify any significant findings, and to date we've not identified any significant findings. As you can imagine, so if you think about the valuation of land and buildings, we take sample checks, so we've progressed a significant proportion of those sample checks on the properties we've checked and not found any issues, and we're continuing with that work for the final stages. But to date, we've not found any unusual movements or anything in our testing that leads us to any concern, and the same in terms of the valuation of the pension retirement benefit obligation.
Councillor Roberts?
Thank you, Chair. I notice on page 20 that you use Savills for the valuation. In my industry, which is the mortgage industry, the lender would normally, well, if you was getting a valuation on a property, you'd want more than one estate agent to obviously value it. You've obviously used one. The other thing is that the valuations you're using from the 31st of March 2024, I hate to tell people, but are almost 2026. So always a year behind your valuations, which of course the fluctuation on the market can make a massive difference to the actual values when you basically wait a year and a half later. Thank you.
Yes, so in terms of the councils use the valuers and we use internal KPMG valuation expertise to assess whether we're comfortable with the judgments utilised. So the decision on the valuer is the council's decision there. In terms of that date there, when we produced the audit plan back earlier this year, the figures for the 31st of March 2025 were not in there. So once we reduce, so that's why we use that as a comparator. Say last year's account showed you had valuation of investment properties of 114 million. clearly there's figures now available for the 31st of March 2025. We wouldn't update that because that was a risk at the time, but when we produce our year-end report that should come to the next audit committee, we'll be saying that information that's moved on to X value in terms of your investment properties, and we've done a programme of work over that. But you're right, I think your comment there was the length of time this process does take. The statutory reporting date is the 27th of February 2026, so you're right, you're almost another year away. You're almost a year from when the accounts were produced.
Ian.
Just as another observation, and again, probably the council are not used to me being optimistic, so apologies, that's 2 in a row. The one thing I really want to take as well is the IFRS 16, so the lease accounting as well. I've seen a lot of problems with that in a lot of industries at the moment. The fact that we're not flagging any concerns at this stage is actually quite reassuring. I appreciate things might still come out, but I just wanted to say well done to some of the team as well for getting the pre-work done to that state that we can get to that point. Obviously, I will remain unoptimistic until the things actually get signed off, just to go back to normal service. But it is a very big piece of work, and if it is going to conclude with no major issues, that's a well done.
Any further questions? Okay, so thank you very much for that report. The actions required, the Executive Director of Resources, welcome Tom, recommends that the Audit Committee considers the information in the report and that the appendix and identifies the further information and actions that may be required. Is everybody happy with this report? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on then, item number 5 is the strategic risk deep dive. This will be a report from Kevin Lane, the Principal Risk Officer. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Good morning, committee. This deep dive report invites the committee to discuss and select a deep dive risk topic, either from one of our strategic risks or from another risk area. To support this, the report itself includes recommendations for potential strategic risks to consider. Notably, the 2 market supply strategic risks have been highlighted on this occasion, with the children's market supply included because of the move to an issue at the last review, which means the risk is now occurring. Adults market supply has been included due to the high reliance on the external market and some volatility in that market. And the high needs block risk is also proposed, as committee might wish to receive further detail around future mitigations. It's obviously quite a popular topic at the minute, that one. We've also added some horizon scanning risk themes. There are 3 proposals: the use and implementation of artificial intelligence, the embedding of the new IT contract, and of course local government reorganisation, which is again another interesting topic. I'd like to hand over to the committee to discuss, debate and select a topic for the risk deep dive to be presented at November's committee. Thank you.
Question, Andrew.
Thank you, Kevin. Very clear. Yeah, market supply of adult and children's social care, very big areas, but I think the authority is well aware of those concerns, and there is a lot of development work going on. The education travel comes back to me frequently, because the scores and the costs are rising ever upwards. And if one's relying heavily upon transport through taxi contracts, etc., it's constantly volatile and it's fundamentally quite inefficient if it's one person in a taxi. So whilst we did get assurance when the appropriate officer came to see us about a year ago, I'm not sure whether we have been assured of the continuing alertness to where savings can be made. We were promised that quite a lot had been saved through re-examining the detail, and there were planned improvements and continuation of that. But I think it probably remains a risk that I'm not fully understanding that we've gripped.
Kevin?
I think it's fair to ask for assurance on that one. Is anyone else in the committee leaning in that direction?
Councillor Bunny.
Thank you, Chair. In my going around my division, quite often going to smaller schools and so on, where they've got issues with SEND, and the whole financing of that does seem to be a major problem for them and presumably the authority. And I would certainly feel that anything to do with the high needs to be part of some work this year to get the assurance that we're getting the best value.
So you'd like to see further deep dive into the high needs area?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, so, yeah, certainly that's what I was meaning. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Just to concur with Stephen there, I mean, I hear what about school transport, but I think it's a quantified scope, whereas I think the higher needs block is a lot more concerning because there are far more moving parts to the system, and I think it's a bit of the Wild West out there from what I can tell and read and looking at some of the children's services budgets, what's going on there. I think there would be more value to that, actually, the higher needs. So I'm happy to second Stephen's proposal.
Okay, Councillor Locke.
Thanks, Chair. To throw a slight spanner in that kind of question, I think the high needs block, especially around the SEND, is a national problem, and it's going to be looked at nationally because it's not just us; it's every council. That me personally, I wouldn't want to use a resource up that could be used on things that we could make a difference on. So whether the transport thing is a bit more within our remit and things we could do something about. As much as the high needs is definitely is a big issue and it's a big challenge to budgets and things, but I think it's going to draw that national attention. It should be looked at nationally. Would we be wasting a bit of our resource if we can't actually change it? Just my kind of 2 pennies worth.
Councillor Carrington.
Yes, thank you. Just picking up on Councillor Locke's comment, those are almost exactly the reasons why I would actually say let's go with special needs. I think Councillor Locke is absolutely right. There are very significant areas of this which are beyond our control. They appear to be beyond anybody's control, central government included. But that doesn't make the risk to our council any less. So just because something is really difficult, and this will be probably the most difficult of the options that we've talked about this morning, excuse me, just because something is difficult does not mean we should not do it. To me, it means that we definitely should do it, both in the interests of the very vulnerable people involved, although of course we deal with other people who are vulnerable, but also because of the accelerating quantum of that risk and its potential impact across the rest of the council's functions. So I would go with high needs.
Ian.
Sorry to make Kevin's life harder. Given what I've just heard, we've got 2 topics that we're focusing on. Is there a reason why we can't do 2 deep dives?
Michelle.
So I don't know if it helps at all, but the challenges we've had around school transport have been very much driven by the SEND and the alternative provision situation. So mainstream school transport, I don't think has been a problem, i.e. that it's been moving along with inflation and other things. It's the numbers and the demand around SEND and alternative provision that was causing the major growth in the school transport area, which is clearly related to the SEND high needs budget pressure as well. So I don't know if that helps, but obviously looking at one will probably lead you to the other anyway.
Thank you, Michelle. Andrew?
Yeah, for closure, Chairman, I wasn't clear when I raised the issue that I was focusing on the high cost SEND area. The normal 35 children in a bus going to a rural school, that's well sorted, and there is competition between bus companies, but it's the high needs, the individual journeys, that's where as Councillor here has said, the quantum of such demand is going up in a way that we don't seem to be able to control. I don't know whether we understand it fully, but certainly that plus minimum wage, national insurance costs on taxi drivers, etc., it's really going up exponentially.
Thank you very much. Any further? Councillor Roberts.
I concur with Councillor Locke. I'm sure most of us know that the government is looking at the HCP plans at the moment and is going to potentially change it all. To what and when we'll actually get a reply back is anybody's guess. But the one that we have got control on is the transport, which from all accounts is getting a bit out of control. So, as I say, I don't disagree with having a deep dive. It's just going to be, we could be deep diving into something that might get sorted out anyway or change. And therefore, perhaps if we concentrate on the area that we can control, which is the transport, then perhaps I agree with Councillor Locke, that might be the best place.
Councillor Locke.
Just to add one further thing, if we identify something that we look at now, what sort of time frame might we looking at before we can have another one, or how do these deep dives kind of work as a general?
I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, but I think you can request as many as you see fit. So if you want to, you can have to for a start, but then if you then request one in 6 months, you can have another, I think.
So yeah, once every 6 months would be achievable, or more often than that, would that be achievable?
It could be. Whether you would want that, it might be a bit too quick.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Not much changes particularly quickly.
Andrew.
Well, to inform Councillor Locke, I think we called for the officer on SEND transport and school transport in general somewhere around the middle of the year, and by November he reported, and not only did he report tightening up for the future, but he reported 1.5–2 million progress in the interim. So it tends to be a quick response area.
Very good. So we're quite keen to look further into the transport side of the SEND delivery, are we? That's the general consensus, everybody. There you go, Kevin. That's a takeaway. There's Councillor Bunny.
Thank you for that. I think the issue is actually to do with the SEND provision, and it's causing many schools a lot of problems when you go there, things which could be we have actually got control of within the authority in irrespective of what happens nationally. It is where we send where we place some of those students on SEND in sometimes smaller village schools or some of the larger academies outside, and it's then we have a transport issue as well. And I think by tackling the actual education provision, you'll find that you'll be looking at the transport as well. So I would say that the two go hand in hand, and therefore it's necessary, in my book, to go with the high needs. I appreciate that national government is looking at it, but even so, we still have to look after those young people, we have to look after our schools, all of which are under, in some circumstances, under quite severe pressure at the moment and causing issues, particularly if you're a small school of 35 students and you end up with two high needs SEND, it can cause you major problems in your day-to-day running, which then could create problems for the longer term viability of that school. And I think that's what we need to be looking into.
Yeah, well put, thank you. Councillor Carrington.
Yes, I just wanted to support what Councillor Bunny said, who has professional expertise in this area. I absolutely understand where my two colleagues here are coming from. And I take the point that central government is looking into this. But let's all bear in mind, we're here for Lincolnshire. Central government has not, in the past, always come up with answers that suit us here in Lincolnshire. Very frequently it's come up with different answers. The fact is they will have an involvement, they will have a role in setting the framework in which we operate. Nevertheless, I think if we come on that broader basis that Councillor Bunny, going just beyond the specific of transport, to our own conclusion, we will not only be doing some very vulnerable people a service, but we're also going to be in a much better position to evaluate and judge and assess whatever central government comes up with, on which, of course, they will be required to consult. So at the risk of deepening the deep dive, I would go for that rather broader perspective which Councillor Bunny has set out.
Councillor Locke.
Yeah, just a thing that came to mind, that there has been a round of send hubs put in the counties to try and look at this, and there is a new, I've been told off for calling it phase 2, it's another phase of send hubs to look at that more holistic approach, which I absolutely recognise it is probably the root cause, and then the transport thing is the follow-on thing. So, you know, I would bow to that. Probably would be the more holistic thing to look at, and look at how well has the first round gone, and the next round is in its, do we say, infancy. So, is there something to be looked at to quantify what has happened whilst the new scheme is going ahead? Because it should have that positive effect on their not moving children, you know, far too far away from their local positions.
Councillor Bunny.
Sorry to labour, thank you for that. I'm just going to say, when the central government tends to come out with some of these broader statements, they tend to be based on an urban model. They tend to be based on areas where there's quite large populations. Our problem as a county is we've got a lot of low-density rural areas with small schools which don't fit into the national London South East model or West Midlands model, and that is where I think our danger will be. So whilst I agree there's going to be some changes nationally, I think we've got to be making sure we've got our actual local level right so that we can be feeding into that national debate as well.
Andrew.
Yeah, this has turned out to be a very interesting topic, hasn't it? When I first raised it, I was focusing on the chap who organises school transport, who came to us last November and assured us he's tightening up and this. But Councillor Carrington has really put his thumb on the issue. But it's not easily solvable insofar as you've got education philosophy, you've got education capacity, you've got staff capacity and staff availability, you've got parental expectations, and I think that's a second and bigger, deeper dive from the mechanics of how to, or the logistics of how best to organise where the taxis go at what time and so on. So I think there are two deep dives. One can be done relatively quickly. The bigger one, Councillor Carrington's one, is a whole educational philosophy debate, going back to Baroness Warnock and thereafter.
Okay, Kevin, so that's feasible that we can do 2 dives overall looking at the whole send strategy as well as the transport?
Yeah, but I would remind you that the next report I bring is the strategic risk review, which means I will have reviewed the education travel risk, perhaps, and I'm meeting with him this afternoon, which is unfortunate timing because I might have been able to give you a verbal update anyway and then sort of sway your minds. But I will go for the 2 if Claire's happy with that and the committee is.
Councillor Carrington.
Yes, with respect to Andrew's eloquence, I think it's just worth remembering that this is about risk management. Yes, there are all sorts of philosophical things to do with SEND provision and all the rest of that, but the deep dive here is not into the overall scale of SEND provision or its type or the philosophies behind it, or, bless her, Baroness Warnock. The deep dive is into risk management, and this is an example of risk management. And on that basis, I think the broader and more holistic thing is manageable. I appreciate that others may not agree, but it seems to me that if we do not do it on that broader basis, we will be artificially restricting what we look at, dive into, and hence artificially restricting the value of the outcome.
Councillor Bunny.
Just really want to support Councillor Carrington. I think we need the one deep dive into the high needs, and that's where we should concentrate. And I think the other issues will come into it, and it might well be in time that we want to pick up transport later. But I do think that what we're talking about is not the transport at this stage, it is actually the way and how we deal with the issue.
Ian.
As Councillor Carrington very well put it, I just want to be clear, and perhaps we can articulate, when we talk about a deep dive, what the product is that will be coming back to the committee, so there isn't a gap in expectation as to what we'll be able to see. As I say, it's from a risk management and assurance point of view as opposed to a policy, etc. So can we just give a little bit of a steer as to what we're likely to see so there isn't that gap, please?
Yes. So we'll expect a report which details the risk itself. So it should explain to you as a committee what the risk is, what it's facing. It should be more than the 3 lines that we currently provide and the summary we provide. It should be a bit more in detail, the causes of the risk, the event itself, then the consequences, and then it should explain how they're mitigating that and how they propose to do it moving forward. That should be what you get in your report, and it will be either, if you go with the high needs block risk, it'll be that, or the education travel. Obviously, if you wanted an overview of the SEND, that would be a lot more complicated. We don't currently have a SEND strategic risk as such. It's split out into the ones we've mentioned previously. So we would need to probably work on that one a lot harder than we would sticking to the strategic risks. Does that answer your question?
Councillor Locke.
Yes, thank you for that. Just to not over skip or give any due attention to the horizon scanning thing, I think it might be pertinent to have that as the next deep dive, considering what's just happened at Heathrow Airport again in the last couple of days. The cyber kind of threat to our council is quite significant, and obviously we're making this cultural shift into using new technologies, and AI is coming along. And I think if we give the contract a chance to bed in properly come the new year, that might be a good thing to keep a good eye on as a next point.
Councillor Roberts.
I was actually going to agree with Councillor Carrington regarding the deep dive. Are we able to do 2 deep dives at the same time? Will it affect, because I totally agree that having a deep dive in the SEND is going to have an effect on the travelling. Are we able to do both at the same time, or are we better just concentrating on the SEND only? I think Claire's saying one. So in which case I would support Carrington to go for the SEND as opposed to the deep dive on the travelling, because I think they're both connected, but I think the SEND's most important.
Yeah, so in line with the strategic risk review that we're doing next time, we can put a heavier focus, a bit more detail into the summary that I provide you on education travel verbally, and then you can focus solely on the high needs block risk if that's what you choose.
Just to come back on one more on that, that's really because of the changes that's just come up, which I think we need to be looking at to see if the new actual hubs are actually working. So hopefully that could be the case.
Andrew.
Yeah, change the subject to Councillor Locke's domain, and I learned from a previous meeting he knows a bit about IT. Cyber security attacks seem to be at least once a week, and these are major companies that are being attacked, and their firewalls aren't working. Now, I understand we're renegotiating on just about to implement a new contract on cyber, on IT, and cyber security has been on the risk register forever. So, how assured can we be that the new contract has got cyber security embedded sufficiently to ensure we don't get a repeat? And those of you who weren't councillors 10 years ago, we got a major hit in Lincolnshire 10 years ago, and it took a lot of work to get round it.
Thank you. Kevin, did you have any recourse to the cyber side of things?
I know some details about the cyber and the controls, however, it is exempt, so we don't talk about it in open committee. But again, it is an option for the deep dive topic. But obviously, if we prefer to select one, focus on one, perhaps that's one for the future.
I would have assumed, Chair, that if there's a new contract, it will be deeply embedded into that new contract. and maybe it needs, 12 months of running to test whether or not that is the case.
Are you looking to see whether we do a deep dive now or later?
But the new contract can embrace the current best practice in cybersecurity, and then sometime after test whether or not it's true.
Okay, Councillor Locke. Yeah, Councillor Locke.
Yeah, Andrew, just to reassure you, it's in place.
So are we agreed that we're looking for a deep dive on the SEND activity as a whole? And are we also suggesting that we look at IT as well?
The next opportunity, I think, would be adequate.
Okay, so just at this time, we're looking for a deep dive on the SEND. Yeah, we all agreed? Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, so the committee is responsible for overseeing the effectiveness of the council's risk management arrangements and challenging the information escalating issues and to the executive. The committee needs to gain assurance over the effectiveness of the systems and processes in place to enable decision makers to understand the level of risk being taken and that the council is prepared to accept. The committee has responsibility to monitor the effective development and operation of risk management and corporate governance across the council. The report assists the council in fulfilling the role and providing the opportunity to select risk or risk themes that they would like to receive a deep dive on. So if you all agreed, that will be carried forward. Thank you. Next, we have a report on the counter fraud interim progress report, and that will be given by Mark Harrison, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this report provides the committee with an overview of the progress made against the 2025-26 counter fraud plan, which was approved by Audit Committee in March of 2025. Some areas to highlight. Page 55 of your pack. Since the 1st of April 2025, the counter fraud team has received 36 referrals across all contact channels. That compares to 12 referrals during the same reporting period in 24-25. This represents an increase of 300%. These referrals resulted in 4 investigations, one of which is closed with no other further action as the individual has resigned. Our work to raise awareness and understanding has played a role in the referral increase. An investigation from 2019 appeared before the County Court in August 2025. The judge found in favour of LCC, ruling that compensation is due. We're currently awaiting the final judgment and how compensation will be paid. Page 56 of your pack. The Counter Fraud Control Reviews delivered and agreed management actions. What is missing from your report, and I do apologise, is in relation to the high actions, it doesn't highlight what the themes are. The themes that relate to them were predominantly around policy, process and controls. Page 57 of the pack, figure 3 below, shows the number of outstanding management actions carried over from 24-25. At present, there are 19 actions still awaiting completion. Of these, 11 have exceeded the agreed completion date. We have contacted the action owners for progress updates. Page 58 of the pack, figure 4, shows the current level of completion against the agreed plan. 4 are complete, 2 further will be finalised this week, and 1 further next week, so that will be 7 in the first 2 quarters. Figure 5 shows feedback received. We received 1 fair response to the question which related to findings and observations. The feedback provided by the client was that there was no real opportunity to challenge the risk. Page 59, figure 6 and 7 are the expenses sampled and the value. Page 60, table 3 are recoveries to date. Page 62, figure 8, confidential reports per directorate. Table 4 is the National Fraud Initiative update, and page 64 are the Counter Fraud Services feedback. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. Any questions? Councillor Davis.
Apologies. God, I wasn't quick enough then. Just a couple of very quick questions for me. Page 55, you make a mention, and you mentioned it in your notes about a county court case and a resignation case. Could you give us a bit more information about those two cases, please, and what the scale was and what the particulars were, as much as you can?
The current ongoing one's the one where the individuals resigned. I wouldn't be willing to talk about that. I can't provide you information outside here. In relation to the one from the county court, that is obviously in the public domain. That related to a member, a deputy manager from a care services home who had misused their procurement card. So and obviously had used it for payments that were pertained to their own personal lifestyle. As a result, we've taken them obviously to the county court. That's a private prosecution, and the judge has obviously found in LCC's favour. At this moment in time, I'm not sure of the actual final numbers. It will be in the tens of thousands though. But the difficulty will always be in how that gets recovered.
Yeah, it'll be £5 a week. Just, if I may, Mr. Chairman, second question. Page 57, outstanding management actions. Total number of agreed management actions high. Are we concerned about how many are outstanding, or does that fit within normal boundaries? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. It's always a concern when there's high management actions that haven't been completed within the timescales. However, it does happen, and provided that the management provide a reason and a mitigation against why they haven't been able to complete those in time, then we would look at providing a further date. But we do follow every one up.
Councillor Rock first, please.
Can I just question page 62? You've got 4,879 duplicate invoices identified. Have they actually been paid, and do we have a value of how much money that is, and or has it been reclaimed? Or is it a technical problem, or is it a case of fraud?
I think that will relate to the National Fraud Initiative. So that's a data set that is provided by us. In relation to the duplicate invoices, no duplicate payments were identified so far, so it could potentially be the fact that it's picked up a double, but when we've looked at it, there has been none.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm aware there has been some sort of technical glitches with the finance software, so at least if it is duplicated, it's picked up and it's not paid is a good scenario. It obviously shows the checks and balances, and the financial procedures are there to stop the payments, aren't they? But it's still quite a high number, isn't it?
Without having the data as to if it's a duplication or how it's been, how we have it in the numbers wise in comparison to the previous years, 4,879, yes, it is a lot.
Andrew?
You mentioned a big increase in referrals, Mark, 300%, I think. Is that a good thing because you're raising awareness, or is it a bad thing that fraud is on the increase?
I think it's a very good thing, Councillor. Obviously, there is a recent change in legislation in relation to, if you bear with me, obviously failure to prevent. Part of the failure to prevent is to show that we, the council, have procedures in place and have certain services in place and provide certain aspects of work that we do. So I would say our engagement, obviously with the new legislation that came in on the 1st of September, we provide updates, and whenever we do any meetings with any of our colleagues across any of the directorates, we'll update them in relation to the new legislation, and part of that legislation would be us training and providing some sort of update. We are awaiting further paper from central government in relation to it. We haven't received that yet, but obviously there is a defence for us as a council to have certain procedures in place, and I'd like to think that that is exactly what we are providing within the counter-fraud team, is that assurance that we have those in place.
Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, in your opinion, are there any fraud control areas that need further strengthening, or are you quite happy with how it's all going?
In relation to our counter-fraud control reviews, any of the areas that obviously we highlight, we follow up. So potentially, yes, I mean, in the 8 highs that I've just talked about there, those are obviously areas that need improvement. And obviously that's part of the counter-fraud control review process, is to address any. And again, obviously, when we pick our plan, we base it on risk. We obviously carry out towards the end of this financial year the counter-fraud risk assurance assessments, which will then ultimately lead to the risk register. And then looking at the risk register, they then look at those areas to take them forward to present to yourselves with a view of the areas that we would look at for the next year.
Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Just to build on the comments from our 2 councillors, and Mark, you always know I go on about, can we have the insight rather than just the data? That's one thing that's for me. Where we've got the high and overdue, again, I'd like to see where we have got the insight as to what's causing them to be delayed, and to give a little bit more of a colour for the councillors to understand that. So that probably needs a bigger lead time to get the answers back from the business. The other thing about the number of duplicate invoices, again, this is probably tying into Claire as well, which is when we have that volume of duplicate invoices, again, just even if it's a desktop review or anything else that can give us an insight as to why we're getting so many, if it's a system, if it's a people, if it's a false reading, it could be anything. I think that insight from the cause would be a very useful piece of work. I appreciate it's got to balance with the rest of the internal audit work and the fraud insight. But I think for me, that would be my request to how we can always do a little bit better next time. That insight would be appreciated, please.
No, absolutely. Obviously, our report has significantly changed, and that was due to the input of the committee. I appreciate it's an organic document, and we'll take that on board, and we'll make those changes.
Thank you, Mark. Very good. Claire.
If I could just add, just in relation to what we're calling duplicate invoices, they're not duplicate invoices. They are flagged through the NFI process as potentially being duplicate invoices. The fraud teams reviewed them, and they're not duplicates. So it's just something that's come up as a result of the Cabinet Office work that we do. They weren't duplicates, so there's no refund necessary.
Thanks, Claire. No, I think really the thing for me is when we have that, and you're right, there's no payments gone, so that's fine. The question is if it's flagging, I think the insight to give the assurance is the case of why we're getting, if we've got potential, what the false assurance is, and whether we've dialed it up to it could potentially be as to therefore what we're seeing, and therefore actually it isn't. That's really good. That means we've got a control in place that prevents it, and that's really helpful. My question would then is understanding why we might steal this number. So for context, we don't need to panic because this is the level of potential flagging. It's dialed to a level that we may not feel is appropriate. It may be, it's the right thing to challenge, and then we'll just kind of discuss and go, right, actually there's nothing there. That's actually really good. And the counter is to say, we've seen nothing.
So just to give you assurance, the way NFI picks them up, it could be an amount of, let's say, £1,000, repeated January, February, March, April, May, June, July. It will be part of a wider payment, but they're not duplicate. On the face of it, the amount matches, the supplier matches, and there may be a change in the date. That would be sufficient for NFI to pick it up. Whereas we would look at that and say, we can see it's a process within a framework that's actually making those payments look like recurrent payments. Hopefully that helps. There is nothing to worry about.
No, I'm happy that there isn't. I think it's that visibility that understands that actually there is nothing to worry about because this is where the sensitivity is set to and these are the variables. So that's fine for me. Thank you.
Councillor Locke.
Just to follow up on the granular detail thing that you've raised. So page 56, you've got your referral since last received per service area. I mean, schools stands out clearly as the top of the charts there, unfortunately. Could we have a bit more detail on actually what that is, what sort of things are happening, what value is it, just to put a context to, if you see a large bar on a chart, does it actually equate to a lot of money compared to, for example, one higher up that's got less incidents could be a far greater case of fraud, or would just help a bit of context.
Thank you, Councillor. Not all referrals are actually, albeit they'll come through to us, but they might not necessarily be around fraud. They may have reported it through to us, but it actually sits outside of our remit, so there's no fraud. It might be a performance issue. So those have been sent to the right department to deal with. But in relation to any fraud ones, yes, I'll take note and we'll provide further information.
Thank you.
Very good, Mark. Any further questions? Councillor Roberts.
Yes, just looking at the, excuse me, the table 4, the blue badges and the concessionary travel passes. Now, I may have not misread it, but does it look like we had issued loads of passes that were illegal or weren't right? Because somewhere it says we've saved about £1 million by not actually, or finding the fraud. If you can explain, first of all, if that is the case, and secondly, how was that allowed to happen, that there were so many passes given out? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Obviously, these are figures that, again, that are compiled from the NFI. In relation to the monies that are identified, this is a central government figure, albeit we don't see it. It's what they calculate, it's what the savings would be. What some of the passes may be is somebody may have passed away and they may not have returned their pass on time. They may have moved on from Lincolnshire. So it's not necessarily that somebody's obtained it falsely and committed a fraud. It's the fact that perhaps we haven't had the controls in place to identify when a blue badge is no longer in use and has been sent back to us for whatever the reason may be, i.e. somebody has passed away, so therefore it should be returned, or if they've moved outside our area.
Councillor Roberts.
So just to so you think there's a good chance, and that does make sense, that travel passes are normally for people who are older and therefore more chance of passing away. Is there no other safeguards to make sure that if somebody does die, that automatically that's cancelled and not done? Or is it only a matter of just suddenly finding, how do you find out that somebody has died and that these travel passes have obviously been provided incorrectly? There doesn't seem to be a lot of safeguard on that side.
I mean, it all depends, the department that deal with what controls they have in place, and there's various ways that you can obviously find out if somebody has passed away, and it's whether or not you sign up to whatever option you choose to find out how somebody has passed away or been notified. But obviously when the NFI crosses all the various data from everywhere else, it will highlight that these still remain outstanding, and then when we've looked at them, obviously the department has asked us as to where and how they. Now we do not subscribe to, or I'm led to believe, to the I think it's
just the government wants
adhere to notify one, where you can go in the registrars and you notify. I don't think we use that system currently.
Ian.
Sorry, I'd probably just build on that one, because we have got the government once and done notification, haven't we, with the DWP, etc., as well as there's other services as well on that basis. So that's fine.
Councillor Carrington.
Just picking up on that last point, really, about that system for notifying a death. We had a bereavement in our family last year, and I used it for the first time. What I was interested in is that, and it's leading up to my question to you guys, for example, electoral services, I was surprised in the area where I live, did not participate in that. So you kind of fill this thing in and you assume that it's going to go to everybody. And then really purely because I'm a councillor and was able to find out, I learned that it wasn't. Is there any particular reason that the department in this case has not been signed up to that for bus passes, for example? Because that, go back to the point raised across the chamber, that sounds like a potentially very high volume area. And as I understand it, there's no incremental cost.
Unfortunately, Councillor, it sits outside of our department. It would be the department that deals with that. So I don't know what their decision is to what services they do use.
And Mark, so it sits outside the remit of your fraud area, but is it a national issue or is it a Lincolnshire issue?
In relation to blue badges, predominantly the biggest issue is obviously down in central London, because that's where your benefits are in being able to get free parking. So it's obviously it's a huge money server in relation to the various charges, ULEZ, etc. That obviously by having a blue badge, and you tend to find that the majority of forged or people will sell on blue badges at a price to those that will live or use in the London area, because obviously that's where the greater benefit is.
Councillor Carrington.
Sorry to keep flogging this one, and I'm definitely not going to call it a dead horse. Chairman, I absolutely understand that about blue badges, but I just wonder whether, through your good office's chair perhaps, this committee could send a message. It would be very interesting to know whether all our departments at this council use this service, or if there are reasons why they should not. Because as a general tool for efficiency, not only serving our residents but serving the council, it seems a little bit difficult to... There may be very good reasons why it's not being used across the board, but it's a little hard to understand, and I wonder if you could arrange for that message to go out. Thank you, Chairman.
Mark, is that something you can pick up?
We can certainly speak to them, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No. So recommendations from this report are to note the progress made and any associated use of resources delivery, to note and to raise any questions in relation to discharging the LCC's fraud responsibilities. Are we all happy with this report? Thank you very much. Unanimous. Thank you. Next up, internal audit progress report, and that will be delivered by Claire Goodenough. Over to Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first of the two progress reports that comes to the committee, which shares the outcome of our independent assurance work. The paper includes a performance dashboard showing the feedback received from schools and the council, along with an overview of actions taken where we've taken action to explain some of the details that have come in further. It includes progress against the agreed audit plan, which I'm pleased to report is delivering in line with timing expectations. The remaining audits within the plan have been scoped and discussed with sponsors and the relevant assistant directors. The report includes details of live audits along with draft and final issued reports, and I can provide the committee with an update on the state of those audits if the committee would like. Just drawing your attention to Appendix 1, of the legacy management issues, the network infrastructure and the cloud hosting risks have all been fully implemented now. The timing of that didn't fall right with the timing of the report. And so those risks have been fully mitigated and closed off with action that's been taken. And in relation to business continuity, we have a current ongoing audit which will look again at those management actions to give you the latest level of assurance on those. Just by way of update, the NIST audit has now been completed and a draft report issued. NIST stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is about the cyber framework. So when you were having the conversations earlier, that report will give you an idea of the cyber environment in relation to the NIST framework that's been adopted by the IT colleagues. School improvement audit, the fieldwork has commenced and is underway at the moment. Wholly owned companies, again, the fieldwork has commenced and is underway. The school's finance report, the draft report has been issued and is with management for comment. And the business continuity audit, the fieldwork has commenced. And in relation to the two grant audits, the DFE and the BSOG, they're both completed and final reports have been issued. Happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Andrew.
Two questions, if I may, Claire. Interesting feedback tables on page 71. The schools love you. Some internal managers perhaps more robust. Is there a tension in terms of capacity to continue to fulfil your contracts with schools, which I'm sure is highly valued, and as a school governor we depend on such external opinions, and the internal demands upon your team's resource? Are there separate teams? Do you team and laid from one to the other? And second question is on page 80, the table of overdue management actions. There's an August 20, a March 21, March 21, a 23, a 22. Those surely should have been closed by now, shouldn't they?
So just to take those in order, the Schools and Academy resource is adequate to deliver the way that we deliver it. So at the moment we are doing what we call a base audit across a 3-year programme. So every school will have an audit visit within those 3 years, and they have been prioritised based on risk functions and risk activities that we've seen. That's probably due to conclude towards the end of next year, the beginning of the following year. That is a separate team because it's very important from my perspective that they understand the context of schools, they understand what it's like to work in schools. It's not the same as working for a council or a district council. They're very unique sometimes in the way that you have to approach the risks and understand the implications of the risk. They do work incredibly hard and they have a very, very fast turnaround time, but it is adequate to meet the programme that we've got in place. They are a separate team to the council audit, which is currently a separate team to the district clients that we've got. Whether that will continue is something that I'm reviewing for next financial year, but the schools will always stay a separate team because of the speciality and the context of understanding that's necessary. I can't remember your second question, sorry.
Table on page 8, yes. Some overdue management actions from 2021, 22.
So the outstanding ones were the ones I've just given an update on in the presentation. So they're the ones from 2021 and 22-23. Moving forward, some of the 23-24 ones we're picking up as part of our reviews currently being delivered. So it's a timing issue when we'll be able to come back to you, which is why there's a partial verbal update. That will be included in the next progress report, along with the other ones that we've not finished, which we're currently in the middle of. They'll also be reported to you as well in the next progress report. It's a timing issue more than anything.
Any more questions? Ian?
Sorry, Claire, this has just come to me, which is never usually a safe option, so I do apologise. One thing I do know from over the years is I've tried to get some correlation between the feedback and how promptly management actions are both identified, delivered, and if they've gone overdue. And try to see if there's a correlation, because you very politely put negotiation of recommendations, which is a very polite way of putting it. And whether you have negative feedback and actually management buy into actually doing the management actions, sometimes that gives us insight into a case of whether that particular business area is playing ball. So it's not specifically for something I'd like to see, but I think if there is an insight, if you get a chance to have a look at that, people don't always like bad news. They may come as no shock. But sometimes in terms of actually whether it was actually the team being unable to see from a pragmatic and a bigger picture point of view, or actually the business just doesn't want the bad news sharing and isn't buying into it, just might be an interesting insight to have a look at.
So we do that informally anyway within the team. The information that's in this dashboard is not driven by that. It's genuinely partially an understanding issue as to where the timing conversations occurred, which didn't include somebody who would like to have been included, because that's done at assistant director level. I think sometimes an area that we need to develop is fully understanding the risk for that area. We are internal audit experts, not experts on what we audit. So therefore, sometimes we can slightly misinterpret a risk, but that's where it comes to the negotiation, that's understanding that further. Moving forwards, I can't guarantee that will always be the case, but at the moment it is. Where we start, if we start to see pushback because of an assurance rating, that will be explained to the committee at the time it's reported.
Very good. Any other questions? No. Okay, so recommendations that the committee notes the contents of the report, and the committee discusses any arising actions and comments pertinent to the future assurance delivery. Are we all happy with this report? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Claire. Moving on, we've got the financial management update and best value duty, and I believe that's delivered by Michelle Grady.
you very much. We first introduced this to Audit Committee back in 2021, and the SIPFA Financial Management Code was introduced in 2019, just ahead of COVID, on the back of a number of local authorities starting to get into financial difficulties. So this code was introduced, and there was a strengthening up of some of the other codes like the Prudential Borrowing Code and the Best Value Duty information. So the report just sets out what the Financial Management Code is, what it was highlighted to do. And at that time we did an internal assessment, and we also had an assessment by Grant Thornton to look at how we were meeting the requirements of the code. Appendix A's got some actions that we identified and progress with those. Also just to bear in mind that some of these will be an ongoing thing, so things like linking our long-term financial resilience and sustainability is very much dependent on getting funding announcements from government, and clearly hopefully that should improve with the idea that we'll get some new fair funding announcements. Things like stakeholder engagement, quite difficult when trying to engage people with the budget setting process, but we've been ongoing with trying to do that. And a big change for the finance team as well. So we insourced a large group of people from Serco last year, delivering a lot of our transactional finance. So there's been quite a lot of work going on in the finance team about skills and knowledge and our learning and development programme. Hopefully that provides you an update and some assurance around where we are with the Financial Management Code. Also, when we last brought this to Audit Committee, the government had just announced a consultation around its expectations around the best value duty. Our external auditors' work has also changed during that time around how they assess us around our best value duty. So Appendix B gives a kind of summary of what the government finally launched in terms of its statutory guidance for local authority duties. What the appendix doesn't show you, which was part of the guidance, was the government's actions that it can take when councils get into difficulty. So it's very much setting out its role as a commissioner and where it could intervene where councils were getting into difficulty. But that's all in the guidance if members would like to see that. I think what we established when we reviewed the best value guidance is there was very much an overlap with what we'd seen in the Financial Management Code, in that we needed to strengthen that alignment with the council priorities and our financial planning and our financial strategy and asset management strategy. So that will be an ongoing piece of work as the council looks to refresh its budget and its corporate plan and priorities. But happy to take any questions about any of that.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I think it's really useful to have that SIPFA standard to test against. It's helpful for us as well. A couple of questions off the back of it on the table, page 87. Will Grant Thornton be coming back to review and sign off on those things that you say you've now completed? And my second question is, in terms of national benchmarking, is there any way for us to assess where LCC is compared to other authorities against this SIPFA benchmark?
So we haven't planned to bring Grant Thornton back. Clearly, our external auditors have a role in assessing our requirements and assessing our compliance, if you like, with the Financial Management Code and best value duty. So Rash might be able to comment about how they assess us in that determination. National benchmarking and compliance of the code, I would imagine that the best way to assess that is those authorities that have had their best value duty assessed by their external auditors and signed off. I'm not sure if there'd be any other way of assessing that, but I don't know if I can ask Rash to help me with that question.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chairman. Thank you. So we do a value for money assessment where we have to provide a public-facing commentary which identifies any significant weaknesses, any performance improvement observations. We produce that at the end of the audit. My earlier presentation talked about the work that was progressing. So what we're looking for is real significant weakness areas. So we've not identified anything to date that's a significant weakness. A lot of these areas do cross over that assessment. So you talk about budgets in here, they talk about governance. One of the key lines of inquiry of that piece of work is governance as required by the NAO code. They talk about, here on page 80, financial sustainability. So we will assess that. So we're looking for outliers and risks, and then we make assessments on that, whether any gaps in areas lead to significant weaknesses. To date, we've not identified any. So whilst our assessment is different, it will give assurance over value for money arrangements at the council and whether there's any significant weaknesses. When we've completed it, our work in 23-24 didn't identify any significant weaknesses. I think there was a small number of performance improvement observations, and that's it. So it is a slightly different assessment, but in terms of the requirements, but you'd see if there's significant failings in the council's compliance with the SIP for Financial Management Code. I think you begin to see that in terms of your level of reserves and our commentary and regarding financial sustainability as an example.
Andrew.
Just another example is obviously we report our financial position, our budgets, our budget management into Overview Scrutiny Management Board and the exec quarterly. I suppose if we weren't doing what we needed to do, then what we were reporting would be very different to what the end outcome was in terms of our finances. So again, an indication of that process in play.
Yep.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but of course the SIPFA report is more than just value for money. There's code of practice issues in there. I suppose my question is, what external validation do we have that when you say, right, we've now done that, and you're signing off as AD Finance, are we comfortable as a committee, Mr. Chairman, through you, that that means it is signed off, bearing in mind it was an external organisation that first highlighted this weakness? I don't know whether I'm alone in thinking that feels like a slight disconnect, or can external audit, as part of their review, are they in a position to say, yes, we concur with this, broader than value for money, but on the specifics of what Grant Thornton found?
Rash, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to do that because clearly our work is very much guided by the National Audit Office and the Code of Audit Practice. We have to stick to that. And if we were to do anything else, it would be additional work. We, very much our terms of appointment restrict us to doing a code audit. That code audit includes financial statements audit and applying the NAO's code. So I wouldn't read across, I wouldn't be able to, under that terms of appointment, to kind of say, I'm now comfortable with that. I think the point I was trying to make is, if there was significant gaps in this, I think you'd be seeing that in terms of you would be seeing that in terms of our finding, in terms of governance arrangements, financial sustainability arrangements as well. But I couldn't, under the terms of our appointment, just do a separate piece of work.
Thank you. Andrew.
I'm on a similar wavelength to Councillor Davies, recognising that this is a well-run authority, but we can always do better, open a cupboard door or two and turn over stones, etc. So I was quite taken, Michelle, with the characteristics and indicators on page 101, which seems like a pretty useful checklist of things that a good authority does and how you gain evidence and provide indication that those are. We've been endorsed at a snapshot in time by Grant Thornton. Do you find merit in using that set of characteristics and indicators in the various sections as a sort of constant self-evaluation framework?
I think that's the purpose of it, because clearly just because you've met the requirements of the code at one point in time doesn't mean that you continue to meet the requirements. And I think there's a number of indicators where if we weren't meeting the requirements that would flush out. So through the annual governance statement, through the external audit, through our financial reporting. One thing that it does mention in the best practice is that councils should undergo a peer review every so many years. So we underwent a peer review probably, when time escapes you, it's probably about 5 years ago now, and generally on the wider remit of the council, and that was when Debbie became chief exec. Grant Thornton clearly looked at a very specific remit, so it would be in keeping with this guidance to continue to have that cycle of peer challenge and peer review, which I'm sure when we get a new chief exec, that might be something that they would want to look at. And clearly, as a finance leader, definitely something I'd want to look at, but maybe give it another year or two to do that. So making sure that we're doing it with enough time to respond to any recommendations that come from it. But absolutely one of the best practice areas is to undergo those peer challenge reviews on a cyclical basis.
Very good. Ian?
I think for me, on the back of what Councillor Davis said as well, there's the thing on any action plan for me is to understand how you're going to demonstrate it. So you either have direct assurance where you get them back in and they check it, but also, like we said, we've got the indicator set. What proxies do we have? What can we point at? And therefore, what do we like to get assurance against how successful that's likely to have been, even if we don't get them back in? You then need to combine that with the weighting to how big an issue is that for you in terms of the scale of things. So understanding all of that is, again, just quantifying a case of what direct assurance do we feel we as a committee would like to see, to say whether we haven't got enough stacked up from other sources to go whether we're comfortable, or actually we're not. This is an important issue. We haven't got a direct assurance on this point, and actually we do need to get something to validate it directly. And I think there's lots of bits in there, and I suppose this is a question back to the committee, that said is there something in there that we do want to get direct assurance in, because it's going to cost us. Where do we want to get that assurance?
Okay. Further comments, Claire, or not? No. Okay. Okay. Any further questions? No. So actions from this, then members of the Audit Committee are asked to consider and comment on the contents of the report and the appendices. Are we happy with everything that's been reported? Thank you very much. That's carried. Next, we will look at the horizon scanning report. This will be given by Claire again. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report for the committee to note the content for future work of the committee. It's to help inform areas of risk and assurance associated with the public sector and specifically with local authorities. It's a paper for information, does not reflect risks across the council. It's very different to the work that the risk management team bring to you and what that looks like, and the reporting that comes from the Strategic Risk Register. The paper is intended to evoke the committee into thinking about their responsibilities in relation to risk management and the role that you play in helping to shape risk reporting, risk questioning, and being informed of the information that's shared with you from a risk perspective. It's particularly, at this time of the year, it's particularly pertinent because at the next committee we've got a strategic risk report coming to you, and you've got the deep dive that's coming to you at the next one. And then after that, in the February committee, you've got the combined risk report where you've got the exec in front of you to talk about how they're managing their risks. So the intention is to give you a view that's outside of Lincolnshire's risks, so that you're informed on the risks that are circulating around local authority, public sector, that's district councils, county councils, just to give you that idea of the sorts of things that are out there to increase your thinking and preparation. Very happy to take any questions if there's anything in the themes that you would like to pull out further.
Councillor Locke.
Just touching on that horizon scanning and risks that are out there, I expect that workload's probably going to be a bit bigger with the LGR coming along. I mean, it would be interesting to have that kind of scope of how it's gone in other counties to feed into whilst we are on that journey.
We have quite a few conversations as a group of auditors in relation to LGR, and it's a very mixed field. So there's been some great practice, there's been some poor practice. It's very difficult to quantify what those will look like for us until we've got a definition of what that may look like. Then it's easier to give you some indication of the risks that are being faced at that point. At the moment, it would be a little bit finger in the air until we know a little more structure about what that would look like.
Further questions? No. Okay, recommendations that the committee considers the content of the report, noting areas for advice and information, and when the committee is undertaking their assessments on the adequacy of assurance services operating across the council. Are we happy with this report? Yeah, thank you, carried. And finally, the audit work programme, which I believe is Claire again.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is the plan for the rest of this financial year. It shows you the timings of the reports, the range of papers and the expectation from the papers. Happy to take any recommendation if anybody wishes to amend anything.
No questions? Councillor Davis?
Just building on Councillor Locke's point, do we need to have a consideration for local government reorganisation as a standalone risk piece?
Just say again the point, please.
So, apologies. Just building on Councillor Locke's point about local government reorganisation, I wonder, because of the impact, do we need to have a specific report that looks at what the risks are, what the mediations are, and what the council's doing about that from a risk perspective?
Okay,
I bet it's already in a report, though.
Yeah.
Hi. So we do have a strategic risk focused around LGR, but it's currently around the uncertainty with it. Obviously, with them making their decision in November, that'll provide a bit more certainty with it. But I am very aware that the team facilitating LGR already have a risk register up and running in place. They had a little support from us at the beginning, but it's run by a transformation team who I work quite closely with, so they've already got that information.
Councillor Locke.
Just thought of another of my favourite topics, NSIPs. Seems every week someone mentions this to me, it's up another number, and I think as of last week it was 28 maybe. The workload and demand on our infrastructure team is immense, to say the least, and it's continually growing. Yeah, where is that? Should that be in here as an identified risk? I know we've had discussions about it before, Kevin, as to, you know, our risk to what I've seen before of losing out of investment versus our risk to actual impact and negative effect on the county, to residents, to farmland. You know, it's a big topic. Should we talk about that featuring in this? It's something that's affecting us.
I think we discussed before we'd probably take it in as a topic at the strategic risk group. They would be the avenue of escalation up to our strategic risk register. So we have a strategic risk group coming up, and it's on that agenda to discuss. And I am aware that the team already, the service themselves, infrastructure, have appropriate risks on there as well already. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so you've got some further takeaways from us to go forward with. It can keep you plenty busy, I'm sure. Just recommendations to this, if anybody's got no further questions, that to make a review and amend the Audit Committee's work plan, ensuring that it contains assurance area necessary to approve the annual governance statement. Are we all happy with this? Thank you, that's pushed forward. Just before we wrap up, it's obviously, you know, commendable to all the officers of the council that you're doing a fantastic job, and we appreciate the amount of work that you put into this. And I think you should also remember all the people that work behind you in their back offices, so to speak. They're doing a fantastic job as well. So you have our full support on that. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.